Good morning, my name is Maro, and I will speak to you today about a project regarding implementing sustainable strategies in coastal areas, options for coastline regeneration through sensory mapping. Our overall goal is to examine the notion of sensory city and the perception of space with all the senses, aiming, of course, to achieve comfort levels, that is visual, acoustic, thermal, olfactory comfort, and to investigate the sense of touch with regard to materials. Our project has monitored the environment. We used a case study area and we tried different mapping tools. The mapping tools that we used are the proposal of Kevin Lynch for the legible city, psychogeographical maps, sensory and comfort mapping. We aim to identify problem specificities, best and bad strategies and practices in our aim of synthesizing a new proposal, the implementation of these sustainable strategies. Sensory urbanism as an approach to explore people's sensorial experiences and understandings of their local environments. Such an approach is justified given the influential role of the senses in developing and affecting experience of the urban environment. The overall hypothesis is that analyzing the urban environment through the senses will create more potential for the implementation of better practices in regeneration areas. A sensory city is a sustainable city. The analysis of such a place can be examined through mapping of different parameters with regard to human senses. Such a multi-mapping process can generate a more holistic approach, which will in turn create a more complete environmental strategy. To go through our mapping tools, just very quickly I will remind you the mental maps of Kevin Lynch, identified in the 60s in his book The Image of the City. So Lynch proposed a way to understand the urban environment, and he developed the term of legibility, which is the extent to which the cityscape can be read. He identified 5 elements: paths, edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks. A legible mental map gives people an important sense of emotional security. It is a framework for communication and conceptual organization and heightens the depth and intensity of everyday human experience. This psychogeography mapping was developed in France and is the link between psychology and geography. The discipline investigates the effects of the geographical environment in the emotions and behavior of the people. It focuses on psychological experiences of the city and reveals forgotten and marginalized aspects of the urban environment. The term was first introduced by the French Guy Debord in 1955, who described the different atmospheric entities of a city. The city is fragmented into units, neighborhoods, linked by the movement of the people. And you can see on the right-hand side the naked city of Guy Debord and the links between the neighborhoods. This is an implementation of a psychogeography map by artist Larissa Fassler, who monitored the Kotzbusser Tor place square in Berlin. So what did she do? Inspired by everyday life in cities and focus on perceptions, patterns, and human behavior within the urban environment, she used traditional architectural instruments such as drawings, models, and maps, but added anthropologic layers and personal impressions to them. The results are cityscapes that combine the hardware and software of a city, a mapped aggregation of the actions and perceptions of the users within the architecture they inhabit. On the left-hand side, you can see the map that she created in 2008, and on the right-hand side, the map in 2014. You can see how more rich the environment is in colors, in signs, in movement, etc. Now we move on to the next tool that we used, mapping through the senses, sensory mapping. And first, sound mapping, soundscapes. Sound maps are digital geographical maps that put emphasis on the sonic representation of a specific location. The term refers to the sonic environment of a specific locale. It may also refer to actual environments or to abstract constructions, such as musical compositions and tape montages, particularly when considered as an artificial environment. Smell mapping, smellscape. The city emits a specific odor that determines people's relationship with where they live. A city's smell could be a combination of its street food markets, the number of restaurants and types of food they offer, the erosion of building materials. Here we can identify the city building syndrome, the emissions of roads and transportation, waste odors, and people's perfumes. Each city has a varying combination of these smells, which makes it particular to each location. You can see some examples of representations of such maps, of smell maps. And finally, texture mapping is the identification of different materials and finishes that can be located within an urban environment. You can see an example on the right-hand side by a project in Melbourne. Texture mapping can be related to thermal and visual comfort as well as embodied energy demand, as it has to do with materials, of course. And finally, a subcategory tactile maps are raised surfaces, 3D surfaces that can be used by visually impaired persons. So, to move on to our case study, we used a coastal area, and because Athens is a city that is linked to Piraeus, the port of Athens, and our coastline is very extended. Coastal areas are sensitive natural environments that have both, of course, characteristics of land and sea. The exploration of this limit between land and sea is carried out with emphasis to potential environmental strategies. Moreover, if the place has not only a natural heritage but also a cultural heritage identity, it becomes even more interesting. And this linkage has been in our mind the whole way, since, as you will see later on, it is a site of significant cultural heritage identity. Now, the case study is a little bay called Aphrodite's Bay in Piraeus, and it has a small fishing boat port as well as a church, which is right here. You can see it, a very small, tiny church, St. Nicholas, and it has a monument, which is this cross, which is dedicated to the lost seamen. The place has various other uses and is mainly used by the local community. Also, it is used for recreation and has some limited commerce activities. People swim in the sea, but the quality of the water is disputed. So, the area is rich in natural habitats, such as the rock formations, with the flora and the fauna. The flora is very rich in terms of biodiversity and different types of vegetation. Also, it is an archaeological site of great importance since along its length, the ruins of the ancient city wall are well preserved and strongly interconnected with the natural habitat. The walls are right here, you can see this. This is here, all the way is the ancient wall of the city of Piraeus. Now we created a series of maps. So this is a movement mapping, different paths, roadway, pedestrian, points of observation, track routes, etc. I'll go through them a little. Okay. This is a mapping in terms of the Lynch theory, landmarks, edges, and then we had the maps for the rest of the three points. I don't have the second map here, so that it would move a little bit faster. Vegetation maps, you see all the different varieties of the different types of vegetation that has been identified. Olfactory mapping, we use the level of intense, and then we have all the different smells and their intensity along the route. And acoustic map, we separated it into natural and artificial sounds, and then classified into sea and air, people and animals, and vehicles and machines, and we monitored the levels of sound in decibels. Texture mapping, all the different materials that have been identified. You can see the plethora here of the different textures. And then we moved on to a synthesis of a new proposal with different functions. That is a mix of recreation facilities and leisure facilities. And the final vegetation proposal and the design proposal linked in this map. The final lighting proposal, some renewable energy thoughts that we had, rainwater management, small urban wind turbines, solar bicycle routes, the acoustic map. We created the sound barrier along the street. We use also both vegetation and panels for that reason. And finally, this is our final map with all the strategies integrated. Now, in order to summarize, we can say that coastal areas are places with natural significance, often natural heritage places. Therefore, they are even more challenging in implementing sustainable strategies. Linking cultural and natural heritage cannot only easily be achieved in Greece, but it is necessary for us. Regenerating urban environments with environmental strategies should be user-oriented solutions. Sometimes we set aside people and we focus on the built or natural environment on its own. Different mapping techniques can inform the design in a more holistic way when at the same time the notion of comfort, therefore the user, is the primary issue of interest. Sensory maps, when combined to comfort parameters, can develop the most promising tool within the scientific field of comfort and mapping. Thank you very much for your attention.